Hello and welcome. Thank you for attending today's Atticus Advantage webinar. My name is Mike Wells, a member of Atticus's client services team. Today's topic is making room in your practice to publish and market a book. Atticus was founded in 1989 to provide in-depth ongoing support and accountability programs for lawyers and law firms that effectively help you increase gross revenues and personal income, reduce stress and the number of hours in the office, help you develop a greater sense of career satisfaction, and allow you more time for family and personal interests. Our programs, workshops, and webinars are designed to streamline the management of your practice, increase revenue, reduce stress, and balance your personal and professional life. Over the past 3 decades of working with law firm owners, we've realized that your legal skills, the technical work you do, is just one element of running your practice. To truly build a successful one, you need to have a mindset shift about the way you think about your role in running the practice. Just being a smart, amazing attorney for your client isn't enough to strategically grow it. Rather, you have to accept and believe that it's just as important to master the 4-corner business management skills as well. You might think of these 4 skills as foundations or cornerstones, or even as the legs of a table. If even one of them is a bit off or wobbly, then the entire structure can be unstable. And that's why we focus the core of our practice management curriculum on these areas: time management, client development or marketing, building a great team, because it adds value to your firm, and cash flow and profitability, because you need to know and understand what it means to prioritize your efforts and casework by profitability. So again, our topic today is making room in your practice to publish and marketing a book. I have a couple of goals for today's webinar. One is just to help you evaluate whether producing and marketing a book is the right strategy for your firm. Is this what you should do in your marketing strategy to help increase your brand and grow the practice? And 2, to consider whether there might be another way that we, Atticus, might be able to support you with your growth goals for your practice. And the agenda of today's webinar is I'll be introducing our guest. We'll be interviewing her, and we're going to give you a free resource for your book as well. And then I have some recommended actions for you. So I'd like to talk to you about our special guest today, and that is Elizabeth Schwartz. Elizabeth is a practicing attorney since 1997. She's a nationally recognized family law practitioner and advocate for the legal rights of the LGBT community. She focuses her Miami-based practice in family formation and dissolution, and she handled the first divorce for a same-sex couple in Florida. Now, while her firm equally works with both straight and LGBT clients in matters of family law, estate planning, and probate, Elizabeth has been at the forefront providing crucial legal protections for LGBTQ families and is frequently invited to lecture nationally. She's board certified by the Florida Bar in adoption law, is a fellow of the Academy of Adoption and Assisted Reproduction Attorneys and the Florida Adoption Council. Now, Elizabeth published a book called Before I Do, and she spells out in this the range of practical considerations for couples and what they should address before tying the knot. She explores marriage rights, protections, and she explains all the implications of marriage, from name changes to getting a license to taxes, insurance, Social Security, and much more. And at the core of this book, one of the messages I think that it gets across, and I've read this book, and it's a wonderful one, is just because you can get married does not necessarily mean that you should. So this was a wonderful addition to legal guides for couples across the country. And in publishing this book, Elizabeth has learned a lot of lessons about putting one together and marketing the book herself. So thank you, Elizabeth, so much for joining us today. I think what you have to say will be really of high use to a lot of attorneys out there who are wanting to produce a book themselves.
Well, great. Thank you so much, Mike, for having me, and just thanks to all your great work supporting attorneys through the Atticus program for so many years. This book indeed has been quite a journey, so I'm happy to help folks navigate the process a little bit and maybe learn from my mistakes.
Absolutely. Thank you. So let's just jump right into our first question. So when you began to write this book, how did you see where it might integrate with your future marketing goals for your practice?
I've always had in the back of my mind how important it is to educate folks about the legal system. We keep the law at such a distance from people, and so I've long worked on issues. I've educated folks in the prison system, various speaking gigs all over the community, and so of course as soon as my practice started getting inundated with folks who had fought hard for the right to marriage, got married, and then quickly didn't realize that they didn't understand what marriage meant, I thought, okay, much more education needs to happen on this. Mm-hmm. And so I've been quite fortunate in that I have this niche practice doing lots of work with LGBTQ families and individuals. So I guess I thought that a book would also kind of enhance my credibility in that world. I think perhaps like a lot of folks having a niche practice for a long time who are listening to this webinar, they might find what we call the bandwagon effect starts to happen. You're the expert, you've been doing something forever and ever. All of a sudden, perhaps it gets easier to practice in that area, and then everyone else thinks that they're the expert as well, and comes along and perhaps makes it more difficult for you to continue to carve out your space as an authority in the practice. So a book can really help.
Absolutely. And I think the word you hit on that really sparks for me is niche practice. Now, I think a book idea works especially well for folks who are already in a niche practice. If you're not in a niche practice, and let's say you're doing more general practice work across several service areas, but you're looking to become a niche practice expert, I think a book idea might be helpful as well. So let's go to our next question here. And that is, you're really busy as a practice owner and a speaker. You are in demand. So how did you ever find the time to write, research, and edit a manuscript?
Yeah, that's a really an easy question to answer, because the only way to answer that is that I had a deadline. I had a deadline and I had to meet it, and it was so hard. What I did was I rented a little writing studio. I mean, literally, it was like a closet, and it was outside of my office, and it was outside of my home. And really, I think I paid $200 a month on renting this little thing. And it was I called it like my sensory deprivation space. Mm-hmm. I mean, there was nothing else to do. There was no there were no distractions, and I forced myself to go there. And I also spent really a lot of time on the weekends. And but really the answer is I had a deadline. I had to have, I think it was maybe 60,000 words that were due on whatever it was. It was September, I guess 2015, maybe, because the book came out in 2016. So I really just broke it down mathematically. I was like, all right, well, I've got to get this many words done in a week. And then as it got closer, I had to get this many words done in a day, and just really made sure that I hammered it out. I think it's really, really hard to write in a vortex, to just write a book and without anybody saying this is when it's due. Folks who can do that, more power to you. That's amazing. But and even if you give yourself a deadline, I think that's helpful. If there's someone, you've got to be accountable to someone. So even if it's your spouse, or your kid or your parent or your best friend or your law partner, maybe you should tell the same thing we do with weight loss, right? It's easier when you have someone who's wagging their finger at you and looking over your shoulder. So I would advise anyone who wants to do this to have some kind of deadline, whether it's internally imposed, externally imposed, but that there's some kind of accountability to make sure that you do it. Because stuff comes up. We're busy. Yeah. We're all busy.
Well, there are four things you said there that I really want to just repeat for folks. One, for you, it helped to find a separate space outside of your office to write, because when you're in the office, you're going to get interruptions. You've got the practices running around you. There are all sorts of things to distract you away from writing. And anybody who's written professionally knows if you allow the distractions to be in front of you, you're going to pay attention to those. So I think that was really smart of you to be able to get a separate space to do the writing of that. And if someone, can't necessarily go out and rent a separate little writing studio, maybe there's a separate space in their home or in their office that nobody else uses that could be that place. It's away from your regular desk. I think that's wonderful.
Exactly.
The other is
that's the key.
Yeah, understanding that you have a deadline. And I loved how you had word count, mini deadlines in between that. You knew every week you had a goal of how many words you needed to get done on your draft. And writing a book can be really overwhelming when you think about word count and page count, and breaking it down into incrementable steps is wonderful advice. Mm-hmm. And then finally, having that accountability partner. You mentioned spouse or child or somebody else, somebody you're accountable to for your word count will really be that impetus and finger on you like, hey, did you get that done? Show me what you got done. You're not looking necessarily for their feedback, but just that you did what you promised to do. You held up your end of the commitment. You got your word count in. That's great.
That's right.
So
thank you.
With your estimated time commitment, how long was it from outline to your final manuscript, and given how long your book is?
Yeah, I think it was about a year. Is what it was from the initial outline and proposal to the final deadline. Mm-hmm. I might be off by a little bit, but it's pretty much it was a year. Mm-hmm. And like I say, within that there were lots of little mini deadlines that were imposed. So yeah, about a year.
Okay, great. Now, how did you make time to plan, schedule, and implement a marketing plan for this book? And did you make any discoveries along the way as you were doing that?
Absolutely. A few of them. One that perhaps goes in direct contravention to the whole point of this webinar, but people don't read.
Yeah.
So I had to
They don't.
Yeah. So in order to kind of to make a marketing plan that would work, I came to learn that you really have to get out there and talk about it, because a book, I learned from some other writer, I forget who it was, a writer, an editor who has a great blog about publishing. He said, a book is a souvenir of your talk. So you go out there and you give a talk, people then will want to buy the book because they want to have a bit more detail, or quite a bit more detail, hopefully. And I like the concept of, they enjoyed you. You were an animated speaker. You told them something they didn't know. They have somebody who could maybe benefit from the message, and they're going to grab the book. And so that was one thing I realized, that just publishing a book and putting it out there and having it on Amazon and having it available and having a website is not enough to get the word out. My mantra, as you so succinctly put earlier, and thank you for the great description and praise of the book, was that my mantra is just because you can marry doesn't mean you should. And so in order to pound that message into the minds of as many people as possible, I had to really get out there, speak to as many audiences as I could. I learned that the best way to reach the most amount of people is to go with an embedded audience. An embedded audience meaning a conference, any kind of gathering of people who would be perhaps a ready-made audience for your book. Going to bookstores can be so painful, because even the best authors could have 3, 4, 5 people show up, and you work so hard to get the word out about it, and it's just can be so discouraging to have that kind of thing. So I had that experience. I had the experience of going to the bookstore where the cashier was the only person that was there, and then I had the experience of going to a conference where folks would be more likely to be interested in this, and having 300 people in the room and selling out every book.
Yes.
So both things happen. So
now you're running a practice though at the same time.
And I'm running a practice. Yeah. I mean, it's really, really, it's been really hard. I really don't recommend this for somebody who's not already very detailed and very organized, because it's a lot to manage. It's a lot to balance. I'm not only quite detail oriented, so things didn't really get lost in the falls of the cracks. But I also have great staff, and we're pretty tech savvy, aside from the technological problems we had getting on this webinar today. Other than that, we make great use of technology. So I was able to work from hotel rooms all over the country, and keep caught up. But yeah, that, again, not for the average person who has really a lot of trouble already handling their running their business, running their business, paying taxes, making payroll, all that stuff, right? I'm sure that many folks who are smart enough to make good use of the Atticus skills are also competent and able to have all of these balls in the air, including a book, because it is a lot of work, and you got to do it all yourself.
Yeah, you said a few
really
more things here that I think I want to point out. You jokingly said people don't read, and that's true to a large extent today. People are very busy, especially busy practice owners, and one of the things we have to think about, even in marketing Atticus, is making sure where are people looking for the information about practice management. And with people not reading, sometimes we found, even when you write a book, that the people who buy the book, some of them aren't even going to read it. They're just buying it because it's a trust factor. They bought the book, and they know now this is the person, this is the expert's expert on this. Well, they wrote a book, right? They must know. Who do you think they're going to think of when they need to refer someone to that type of practice area? So it does go a long way for your marketing. Even if the person doesn't read the book entirely or at all, they're going to think of you as that expert because you did something pretty impressive, which is publishing a book. And two, you mentioned having great staff, and in making time to market your book, I think that is key. Having the buy-in from your support staff to help you work this in, because it's important to the future of your practice to be able to make time for marketing it. So that's great that your staff was able to do that. And you are not at a super large firm. There's not 100 staff members there to support you, right?
No, it's just 4 of us here. And yeah, no, we definitely had to get buy-in, and they've all been dealing with the fallout, because I get calls from people all over the country, who came and saw me and have questions, and that's of course a bit of a frustrating aspect of this, which is that while it's been really great for me in many, many ways, and you can't put a price tag on being able to say, Elizabeth Schwartz, author of, right? It's lovely to have author of after your name. One thing that's frustrating about it is that, of course, I'm only licensed in the state of Florida, and I've gone all over the country, and so it's not been as much of a revenue generator as you might expect. And of course, that's just the nature of the beast as attorneys, right? We're limited to our practice, unless we're immigration or bankruptcy, and we practice federally and can do anything anywhere. For the most part, we are limited. But I would say that it's still been great, because of course I make referrals to colleagues all over the country, attorneys who have similar practices as I do, and I know they appreciate that. And of course those referrals come back. I very much believe in the law of karma, right?
Yes.
And you put it out there, and you send folks great clients, and those clients will come back to you. But I just did want to mention that, because I don't want folks to feel like, okay, I'm going to write this great book, and then I'm going to get sort of clients from all over, because of course our practices are limited. But it's really, to me, frankly, the most rewarding aspect of it has just been, folks who've really said to me all over the country, have said, wow, thank you so much for taking the time to write this and sharing this information with us. And I hope that that others who take the time to impart their wisdom through a book will enjoy that same kind of feedback. It's really so meaningful when you've taken so many weekends and so many hours and spent so much money, because this is not, that's the other thing we should talk about. This is not a revenue generator necessarily. This could be a real revenue suck, with traveling all over the place and stuff. And, books are, you don't get rich for writing.
Oh, sure. Well, and and I have an idea for you, but I want to say one more thing. You also mentioned conferences as captive audiences for marketing, as opposed to the experience of going to bookstores. And I think that's an excellent point when you're going to legal conferences or other industry-related conferences. If you're invited as a speaker, or if you have an opportunity to have a booth for your, to promote your firm and your book together, that's a wonderful place to start if you have an apprehensiveness to going to bookstores. And that's rough. I mean, that's, to me, setting up a table in a bookstore is a bit like cold calling. You don't know what you're going to get. And, it's a different experience than maybe a self-published fiction author who's out there marketing her vampire erotic novel. You are trying to have other peers know about your expertise. My idea for you, and the listeners can take this too, you published a book and you mentioned, you're licensed in Florida. My idea for you maybe is to take your book and to do customized versions state by state, and offering it up as a licensed version to attorneys that you have referral relationships with in other states. They can take their basic state information perhaps and do a Illinois version of Before I Do, that you work out some type of arrangement. That maybe there's a
that's a great idea.
Yeah.
That's a great idea. I love that.
Because, we always like new editions of books. So, all right. So what kind of marketing support did you get from your publisher or anyone? And what did you have to do on your own?
Yeah. So, my publisher was lovely. They really were the ones who sought me out to write this book, because they really wanted to educate people on what marriage means and what it doesn't mean. And so they found me because this was what I was speaking about all of the time anyway. So I having said that, publishers don't have a lot of money, right? This is not a news flash to anybody listening to this, that the printed word is suffering in terms of its revenue generation for publishers. So they don't have a big marketing budget. They pushed it out. They sent it out to a bunch of bookstores all over the country, but they didn't send me anywhere. I had to send myself anywhere. They got me lots of interviews and reviews, and they got me a great like a radio interview with Brian Lehrer, WNYC in New York, stuff like that were really wonderful. You can go on my website and hear some of them. They really were nice. It's elizabethschwartz.com/beforeIdo. And so I did a bunch of interviews, but I hired a supplemental publicist, which is what most authors do. Most authors get somebody else to assist them in getting the word out. And then I also, in certain key markets, I worked with folks in those communities to expand the audience for when I got there, to push out the word on social media and in newspapers locally. So that's why I say this was an expensive endeavor. And I remember when I first was making the decision, should I get a supplemental publicist, a colleague of mine who's published many, many books and works actually at a publishing house in Manhattan, he said, the best reason to go for a supplemental publicist is it's insurance against regret. You won't, because if you don't do it, if you don't spend the extra couple bucks, you just absolutely never know if a difference would have been made had you done that. So it's insurance against her.
Well, and you're an attorney. You're not a publicist, right? So that's
Correct.
not your area of expertise.
Exactly right.
As a wonderful attorney and business owner, and hiring a publicist was a great idea for you. I want to just add on to that. Any of you who are listening and thinking, hiring a supplemental publicist, what does that look like or cost? That there's varying levels of that. You may think of also just hiring a temporary marketing assistant on this project too, for a quarter or two of the year, and working with them on a marketing plan. And that's your implementer. You come up with like what you'd like to do. If they have the right marketing experience, they'll give you suggestions. But at the bare minimum, imagining having to start up a social media profile for promoting the book on different platforms, managing the website updates and your calendar of appearances, getting some speaking appearances for you. That could be what that marketing assistant or publicist would really help for. And it's really, when you think about what you might charge per hour, Elizabeth, and I don't know your hourly rate, but a lot of attorneys, if they charge $200 to $400 an hour, they can hire a publicist for a lot cheaper than that, than trying to do it themselves and do a terrible job.
Right, exactly. Right. Not only are they a fraction of the cost, but they actually know what they're doing.
Yes.
And one great sort of first step, if you're trying to think about where to turn to find like-minded folks, is go to the bookstore. If your community is lucky enough to still have actual bookstores, physically take yourself and go to the bookstore and look at books that might be similar to ones that you're thinking about writing, whether it's in the reference section or self-help, or if there's even the legal section or any, the nonfiction, and look and see for anything that's remotely similar. Look in the acknowledgments, and you will see the folks who, the agent, the publisher, the editor, the publicist, you'll see those people thanked. Not always with the publicist, because sometimes you get them afterwards and after it's published, but most definitely the agent, because you didn't get, for the most part, you don't get published without an agent. And look and see who they thanked, because those are folks that you can cold call, reach out to and say, hey, I've got this book idea. What do you think? Do you think you could sell it?
All right, great. I think it's an excellent suggestion. Looking for similar books to yours, business sections, self-help sections. If it's a niche book like the LGBT area for you, checking out those other authors, seeing who they worked with is a great tip. Now, what obstacles or pitfalls did you encounter in whether it was the writing or the marketing of this book?
Yeah, it's the time, right? I mean, it's just absolutely the time is so difficult to make. We get so busy and so bogged down, and with the whole work-life balance is already a challenge without adding this on top. So making the time was incredibly difficult, and then trying to decide. You could throw just a ton of money at it at this endeavor, and so for me, it was really hard to decide to say no to certain things, and you don't have a crystal ball, so you don't know. I mean, I've gotten it wrong. I mean, I've shown up at conferences where I thought, nobody would be interested in what I had to say, and I'd get 10 people there, and I had, a crowd and didn't have enough books, and people say, oh yeah, I'll go online and buy it. They never did. And so and then the opposite has happened, where I've shown up in some other part of the country with a bunch of books and had to go home with most of them. It's just really hard to know. Right? What's gonna result? So the timing, and then kind of deciding where you should go, how far you should go with it, and knowing if you are, pushing it out enough, but not too much, that kind of thing I found with.
Well, and even just understanding when you're at certain events, if you're going to sell any copies there. You mentioned running out, maybe before that event, had it occurred to you to, do we need to have one of those Square devices to hook up to my cell phone so I can sell books on site? If like,
I have a Square. Oh, yeah. For sure. Yep. Yeah. No, that's the first thing I got, because Squares are free. So those are great and easy, and you just can. I keep it in my purse all the time, and I do a ton of speaking, so I'm always. In fact, people tend to want to buy the books in cash. They're $15, and I'm like, no, actually, can you? Even though I lose a little bit teensy percentage on it, I actually like to keep the book sales. I asked them if they would pay with a credit card so I could keep it all organized in one little account, and I could see more or less. I could do my accounting at the end of the year.
And you're keeping that information, so the next book that you do, you have a subscriber list right there.
I don't know if I have another one in me. It really was a lot of work, and but you never know.
You never know. All right, great. So how has the book become a growth factor for your practice, and how has it changed your marketing strategy overall?
I think it's definitely made me more conscious of having of having my message kind of in a clear capsule, the elevator speech, if you will. It's made me more conscious that people have a very short attention span, and that you want to make sure that you're concise and clear and focused when you're sharing your message. I think that, and generally, it's changed my marketing strategies in that I've been more focused on social media, Twitter, my little hashtag before I do book. I've been focused on when I see an article that's sort of relevant to tweet it out with the hashtag before I do book hashtag, and sort of been a bit more focused on stuff like that. Whereas again, this is not something that I've had a lot of time or quite honestly interest in doing in the past.
All right, great. And how has writing the book affected your firm's market reputation?
It's definitely increased, I think I've always enjoyed a very good reputation, but it's definitely, I think, increased my credibility. It's definitely increased my credibility with regard to this particular practice area. Sure. I know that I'm getting a lot of clients who say she literally wrote the book, and it's even if it's not in my state, I know that it has enhanced people's sense of my authority on the topic, and I've been invited to speak. I'm actually just got an invitation to speak at a conference in Toronto, where they're paying my expenses, which is great, to speak on some of these very issues. So yeah, it's certainly been wonderful in that regard.
Fantastic. And let's just pretend you just met another attorney and they've got this great idea for a book, but she wants your top 3 tips for a successful writing and marketing plan. What would your top 3 things you would say to them be?
Well, the first and most important thing is I would say have it come from an authentic place. Really have this be the thing that you do, the thing that you are. You might have a great idea for something you heard on the radio or a story that you read, but it's not your real area of focus. I mean, I was asked to write this book because a law professor gave a panel with me at a university, and she loved what I had to say. And when an editor asked her, who does she know who could write this book, she said, Liz Schwartz. This is what she's been talking about. This is her message. So have it come from an authentic place for you. That's the first most important tip, I would say. Again, not just an idea that sort of comes to you, but that's really someone else's story or someone else's book to write. Have it come from really the core of what you do, your practice. Secondly, I think that again, having a really a focused writing plan, make sure that the pieces are in place for you, that your business is successful so that you can afford to take a bit of time off. Don't expect that this is going to pay your mortgage and this is going to make your business more successful, because again, you are spending money on publicists and travel and websites and all that kind of stuff. So, make sure that you are already coming from a successful place in your business that you can afford to spend the money and the time to write this thing and to promote it, to make it a successful endeavor. And then, I think the third thing I would say is, make sure that there is room for it in the marketplace. The other reason I'm sending you to the bookstore and online isn't just to look at the list of acknowledgments, but is to, frankly, also make sure that this thing isn't already out there. Make sure that you're filling a void in the marketplace, however small it may be. Now the book you may be thinking about writing may have been written 15 years ago, so certainly it could bear an update. Certainly it could bear your unique voice. Certainly you might have a spin on it, but I don't reinvent the wheel. Add something new to the marketplace.
Yeah, those are great tips. You spoke to, for me, authenticity. You wrote this book because you cared about the issue. And one of the things that attracted me to your book was this wasn't a book that an attorney wrote to make money. This was a book that I knew that the author cared about these issues well enough to give really helpful, strategic advice to help couples or people considering marriage. And I really like that, in business books or self-help books. You can tell the difference between ones that were just written for, some fast money because it was a trendy topic versus the ones that were written because the author really cared about this issue and wants to help people. And two is the affordability and knowing you can afford the time and the money, you said, to write it and promote it. You've got to think about that maybe from a budgeting standpoint. How much of an investment are you going to be able to make in terms of time and money? And it's an investment, not an expense. You're investing in the future of your firm because you believe this book will be important. And then finally, I like what you mentioned about room in the marketplace, visiting bookstores, checking out online bookstores, seeing what other books are out there. You don't want to reinvent the wheel. While there are other similar topics, just be really thoughtful about whether what you have to say is different or better than what the last book on that subject was. If it was a lot different and a lot better, great. But if it's probably the same thing somebody else would have wrote, but you're just going to rewrite it in a different voice, maybe it's not the right book for you. So that's great.
Thank you.
I want to point out, Elizabeth has gone out and spoken at bookstores. She's been on podcasts. She's appeared on YouTube channels from different interviewers. You've hustled. And marketing means being able to talk about your book to audiences, promotional tours, and signings. Is there anything else you want to say about that, Elizabeth?
Aside from you got to hustle, I guess really it does help to have someone who, and if it's not you, it does really help to have someone who's really pushing things out on social media. I didn't really do that. I guess I'm just sort of not as savvy as others who hire somebody to do Facebook promoted posts and sponsored things. But I would certainly recommend that if that's the kind of thing that you think could be meaningful for you. But otherwise, I mean, here's what I would add. I would absolutely suggest that you think long and hard about how much you like talking to people, being out in the world. I generally like it. I generally enjoy meeting people. I'm generally interested in people. So for me, this was an easy thing. I've gone to conferences. I spoke at a conference in New Orleans in March, and the organizers were like, we've never seen an author who's so extroverted and articulate and whatever. I guess maybe I'm because I'm a lawyer. I don't know. We're used to talking to people. But on the whole, being an author, this is really the answer to one of the pitfalls. It's really hard work for an extrovert because you got to sit in a room and shut the hell up and just sit at your computer and write. Yep. And I really, that was hard for me. What was easier for me was going out all over the country and talking about it, which I'm still doing, and going out and giving a talk in a few weeks. So you've got to be somebody who enjoys that. And if you're not, again, think long and hard about whether this is something that you want to do.
Exactly. A couple of things I want to point out. I found this article about you here on Miami Herald, and I know Steve Rothaus. I've known him since probably, 2004 or five, through the National Lesbian Gay Journalists Association. Wonderful guy. So when I saw that, I was like, it's Kismet. I'm seeing Steve's name with an article about somebody I'm talking to. I was happy about that.
Oh,
Um,
that's great.
and then the other, you've mentioned this a couple of times. You've for an extrovert, it can be hard to sit down and write. And, one of the questions I hear people all the time is, like, I'm stuck. I don't know. It seems so overwhelming. How do I get this going? And you just write. Don't worry about being perfect. Just get your thoughts down.
Oh, that's great advice.
What an editor's
great
for.
advice.
Don't try to write perfectly. Yeah.
That's right. Well, and right, when you think about your first draft, it is just that. It is just a first draft. So don't make yourself crazy over every word and every comma.
Yes.
That's great advice, Mike. Just get it out there. I would always say, I'm just going to vomit this out, and then the editor will make her tweaks.
Well, maybe I'm an oddball, but what I love more than writing, and I spent 12 years as a newspaper reporter, but what I love more than writing is rewriting. That's my favorite part, is I get my stuff down and I go back, and my favorite part is going, oh yeah, now I can fix this. I'm much more clear on this. And I think book writing, there's probably some similarities with that. The rewriting can be more fun for you. You've already done the hard work.
Absolutely.
You got the draft out.
Yeah, right. you got a little distance from it, and you're able to look at it with fresher eyes. Yeah.
Yeah. So there are many venues for marketing your book or content. There's speaking engagements, having a YouTube or Vimeo channel to talk about your book, to talk about the concepts in your book. There's social media. You could have a newsletter, press releases to media referral sources. Are there any other venues that you marketed your book in?
Well, I think speaking engagements covers a lot of things, right? So definitely I did a lot of that. And I didn't do a newsletter, which I guess I always lament. I really should do that, but it just, you know what it is? I spend most of my day unsubscribing from things.
Yes.
So I just want to be one of those people to somebody else. But the one thing that isn't on here that I really focused on a lot was radio. Because, radio, podcasts, this is very much the way a lot of people are getting their information.
You're so right.
And because my book was what they call evergreen, it's not particularly time sensitive, and nothing's going to change. It's always going to be pretty much the law, and because it's national, it's the principles in it really work. I mean, I spent a lot of time conferring with my colleagues around the country to make sure that the assumptions I was making were pretty much accurate. And of course, I hedge a lot in the book, saying, how this is very state by state and whatever. But because it's national and because it's evergreen, I was able to do a lot of radio around the country that the publicist helped me get, and that is, as I say, really a great kind of, you can always listen to it. There's long and short versions. I've got a whole bunch of them on my website, and it's a really nice way to do it. Oh, the other thing I would add is that a couple of the bookstores that I gave presentations in, one in Miami, one in Oakland, California, they recorded me. They did a video. And so those are also great. It's great to do that because, if what you're hoping to also do is be invited to speak at conferences, it's really nice to be able to show people a little clip of your speaking, so that they'll know, okay, you're a dynamic, interesting speaker. You're not going to put the folks to sleep. So it's great if you can get a recording or two of some of your talks in video, so people can kind of get a sense of what it might look like for you to present to their audience.
Exactly, because then that conference organizer or event organizer can have confidence in you as, okay, now I know Elizabeth's going to be an engaging person for our audience to listen to because here's some videos. I see how she is, her personality. That's a wonderful idea. And you mentioned podcasts too, and the way people consume content these days has changed, especially for busy professionals, or if you're thinking of writing a book for other attorneys. Think about how busy you are as a practitioner, and when you have time to consume content, And some of you may be listening to podcasts in your car on the way to work, or when you're at the gym, or just as downtime after hours. Podcasts are a wonderful place, and if you can find the right interviewers and shows to appear on, it's a really great other venue too. I think people don't have time to read often, or they think they don't have time to read, so they don't. But they're willing to listen to somebody being interviewed that's interesting, talking about a topic they care about for 2 to 15 minutes, or on this case, this webinar. We hope you're listening longer. Thank you for that. Yeah.
And a lot of the folks who do podcasts, they're scoping out guests, so you can really reach out and say, hey, how'd you like to have me on? I'm happy to talk about this. And let me tell you, lawyers, they love getting lawyers, because then they'll do a Q&A, and then people will call up. I did one radio interview. It wasn't particularly a podcast. It was a radio interview, live recorded, and it was, I think, in a DC or Baltimore radio station. And folks were calling up with their griping about their spouses, and it was really funny. It was like with legal questions that, of course, I wasn't able to answer because I wasn't licensed in that state. But I was able to say, well, generally, here's how divorce works, and generally, here's what you might think about with your kids. So they loved having a lawyer on the line. So definitely offer yourself for that.
Great advice. So we have a couple of free resources that are available to today's listeners here on the dashboard. A couple of PDFs you can download. One on the key chapter objectives, and the other one is actually more of a starting place, a book outline. So unlike with fiction books, a lot of fiction authors do outline their novels, especially historical type fiction books, because they're so complicated. Think of Game of Thrones and how many levels of characters and plot lines are. But with a nonfiction book, I think it's really a good suggestion to do a book outline. If you have a book idea and you have a lot of it in your head, you need to get these things down on paper. This is a really simple form. It's basically some boxes with some numbers, but it's a chance for you to think about, well, what order would my chapters go in, and what would they be about? The tentative chapter titles and 1 or 2 sentences summarizing each chapter. And it's not set in stone. It's more like wet cement. It's pliable. You can change your mind as you go along and as the book comes together. And the other one is the key chapter objective. So for every chapter you think you've identified, again, writing even a little deeper summarization of the objectives of that chapter, and including the main idea and at least 3 concepts, details, or information that you're going to cover by the objectives. So these are just some simple documents you can use. Print them out, use the PDF if you like to write it on your tablet. And it's free to you. You can download it from the dashboard. And, we know that with writing something out, it's so overwhelming at the beginning, but if you can just get your ideas down on paper, handwriting it really goes a long way to solidifying in your mind that you can get this done. And it starts to become real once you start writing it down. So you can download those from your dashboard, take a look at them. And if you have any questions about them, just email me at grow@atticusadvantage.com if you have some other thoughts or suggestions for how we might even improve those free resources. Now, Elizabeth has shared a lot of tips and advice with you with her experience, and the obstacles and pitfalls that she mentioned play right into this image of this candy jar. You're running a practice and you are perhaps the only attorney, or you have maybe a few associates, or maybe you have a partner or two, but you are very busy and you're putting out fires, everything from handling client calls that are coming in, staffing issues, looking at the latest budget reports, trying to schedule in a networking luncheon. If your day looks like this, all the tips and advice that Elizabeth has shared with you today, and anything that I've said that you thought sounded really good to you and you want to try, if your day is this full, your week is this full, you don't really have room to put those in there. And it's unlikely you're going to succeed at getting through most of those suggestions, if even a few. Running a practice is hard. And if you're constantly burning the candle at both ends, it's hard to get new projects off the ground, no matter how much you believe in them, if you can't create some room in your day. And at Atticus, we like to show you these images. And somebody who has room in their day to work on new ideas and new projects. And that's what would fit in that empty area of that jar. The lower half of the jar are those things you have to keep on your desk, the stuff you can't delegate away. But if there's 20, 30% of the items that are on your desk that you could strategically delegate to another team member, refer out to another counsel, so that you could make some room in your schedule to work on your practice instead of constantly working in it and being buried by all those jelly beans. That's the way to create growth and change in your practice. And, that leads me into our recommendation with anybody that we are talking to for the first time about practice management strategies and growing your practice. And our recommendation is to take a deeper look at your practice and your leadership and marketing skills. Elizabeth's done that when she thought about how she would put this book together, how she would market it, and she knew there were areas that she was not strong in. She mentioned to you that she hired a supplemental publicist. So that's her thinking like a business owner, not necessarily like a smart, brilliant attorney that she is, but she took a look at her leadership and marketing skills. And this webinar maybe gave you a peek at your firm's performance a little too, and how you're doing in your marketing, whether it's book marketing or some other aspect. And for some of you, it might be a wake-up call that alerted you where you really need to focus some other efforts. So where we go with that is the best action you can take is to learn how your unique strengths can be leveraged to increase your firm's profitability. And how we do that at Atticus is a practice growth diagnostic. And part of that diagnostic includes these elements here. I'm going to just mention them. The Focus Disc Advantage, which is a behavioral assessment which looks at your communication and management styles. There is a practice assessment survey as well, where we examine those 4 firm foundational elements of practice growth that I mentioned earlier in this broadcast: time management, marketing, staffing, and cash flow profitability. And then there is an advisor growth analysis. It's a consultation that you get with one of our team members who reviews your assessments, shows you the areas where you have the greatest opportunity for growth. And they're going to give you the 3 most impactful actions they think you can take to implement some change right away, positive changes in your practice. You can't create room in your day unless you have a really good bird's eye view of your practice and its processes and its strengths and its weaknesses, everything from how your client intake is to your staff members and team support and where you might need some changes, and in yourself and your management style. So the practice growth diagnostic is our entryway into helping you with that. So your investment for the diagnostic is $295, and that includes everything I mentioned: the practice assessment survey, the DISC assessment, and the report that you get, which in and of itself is a $125 value. And Atticus is the world's leading provider of DISC assessment surveys to law firms, and that 1-hour teleconference with one of our advisors. So if this is something you'd like to get started with, you can visit our website at atticusadvantage.com and click on the Let's Get Started link on the home page. And with that, I want to let you know there is a money-back guarantee with any program or service we offer with Atticus. We understand enrolling in a relationship with us is a significant investment, even at $295, which is maybe some of you, your hourly rate is more than that. And for that small amount of your time and resources, we want to make sure you feel confident in what you're getting for us. That's why we offer you a money-back guarantee. At the end of this presentation, I just want to let you know there are a lot of ideas you've heard, a lot of recommendations. And one of the pitfalls we see people fall into is the 90-day Think About It program. I'm going to think about what they said. I'm going to think about it some more. And 90 days later, nothing has changed in your practice. Nothing has changed in your marketing. So that can be a pitfall if you just think about things. And there is real strength in taking some action with this. So I would encourage you, we would love to talk to you. If you have questions about Atticus or this webinar, reach out to us at Grow at Atticus Advantage. I definitely want to thank everybody who's tuned in today. It shows you've got some interest in growing your firm and improving your services to your clients and the issues you care about. And I want to thank you, Elizabeth, for your time. I really appreciate the candor and your willingness to share your experience with all these attorneys out there who are wondering if they can accomplish what you did.
Thank you so much, Mike. I appreciate it, and thanks for having the backs of all of us lawyers around the country.
Absolutely. You have a great day, and everybody else, you have a great day too. Once again, any questions, please follow up with us at grow@atticusadvantage.com.
Thanks so much.